Good evening, dear students. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy. So we all knew that UPSC has been conducting mains examination of 2024, and we all knew that gender studies papers and even essay papers have been completed. So however, in this session, from this session onwards, so we'll try to discuss and analyze all UPSC mains 2024 papers in a very detailed manner, and we will also try to understand the nature of the questions and how UPSC has been linking current affairs with the syllabus. So everything we are going to understand in this session, so that you may have important insights on how UPSC has been framing mains questions, and you could also understand how to structure the answer, how to address the actual demand of the question which is asked in the mains examination, which is very important to fetch you good marks, or it will help you score a very good marks, because very often students write a different content which is not exactly the demand of the question. However, so you have to understand what is the demand of the question, and you should know how to structure the answer as per the question requirement, and you should also improve your presentation skills. And from this session onwards, so we will be discussing all these different aspects in a very detailed manner, so that it will be helpful for you in your mains examination, and it will also help you to score good marks if you are appearing your state public service commission examinations or UPSC mains examination next year, right? So I hope this session is going to help you all, and without any delay, we'll start the first question in gender studies paper 1. So we all knew, if you look at the syllabus of gender studies paper 1, I hope you have already gone through the syllabus of gender studies paper 1. It consists of Indian art and culture. Remember, ancient Indian history is not part of the mains syllabus in gender studies paper 1. Rather, it is asked Indian art and culture, and apart from that, it also consists of the modern Indian history, right from 1857 revolt or the decline of the Mughals, and even the Indian freedom struggle and the personalities who are part of the Indian freedom struggle, and then the post-Indian independence history, and the world history, Indian society, and also world history and the geography, physical geography, Indian geography and world geography, and even climate change related aspects. So everything. Now if you look at the paper this year, so most of the questions are being asked from these topics alone. So therefore it is very important that you have to identify the key topics, and you should also focus on those key topics. You have to give a maximum amount of time to those key topics. If possible, you should have a short notes. With what happens with the short notes, you could revise this short notes multiple number of times, and this will help you recall more number of points in the examination. It is very important. Due to paucity of time, you have to remember points, and you have to recall as many number of points as possible, so that you could reproduce those points in the paper, on the paper, right? So therefore these are the important syllabus topics that you have to focus on. Remember, the first topic in gender studies paper 1 is Indian art and culture. So this first question reflects the Indian art and culture topic. So remember, there were also questions previously about Indus Valley civilization, Rigvedic times, later Vedic times, Buddhism, Jainism, so all these topics. So these are some of the important topics that you should focus on. The first question which was asked in gender studies paper 1 of UPSC 2024 mains examination is, underline the changes in the field of society and economy from the Rigvedic to the later Vedic period. So this was the question that was asked. And if you have gone through the ancient Indian history, in ancient Indian history you may go through different phases of different cultures in Indian history. You go through the Indus Valley civilization. Most of the students go through the Indus Valley civilization, and after Indus Valley civilization you read about Rigvedic society and the later Vedic society. Now the question is, what are the important changes one can observe in the society and the economy of Vedic age as well as the later Vedic age? And if you have gone through both Vedic age and later Vedic age a very a detailed way, so you could easily address this question. This is not very difficult question, and there were no keywords attached, or there were no directive words attached to this particular question. A very simple question, a straightforward question. And if you knew what are the major changes that took place in society and economy of both Rigvedic age and later Vedic age, you could easily understand this question and you could easily address it, and you can also score good marks in this question, right? So I don't think that this is a too difficult question. Maybe the level of difficulty for this particular question is medium or below medium. Even if you have gone through this topic twice, you could easily address this. So therefore, how we can structure this question, that is very important. So when it comes to the structure of this question, so first and foremost, what you have to do, you just have to introduce both a Vedic age as well as the later Vedic age. So what are these different cultures, when they were started, etc. Right? So you just address this very briefly. And after writing that, you just briefly discuss, this would be the demand of the question. You just have to discuss the changes that took place in the society and the economy of the Vedic age, as well as in the next part you have to write the changes that took place in society and economy of the later Vedic age, and ultimately you have to conclude this answer. Right? So this is how you have to structure the answer. This is how you need to frame, you need to have a proper framework for this question, so that you can write the best answer. And let's get into the discussion of this particular question. As I have already told you that you just introduce both a Rigvedic age as well as the later Vedic age. So in the Rigvedic age, Rigvedic Samhita is the earliest known text, right? So it is one of the earliest known texts, and this text relates to the early Vedic period. So however, so if you look at the timeline of the early Vedic period and its existence, it was placed between 1500 BCE to 1000 BCE. So this was the time period of the Vedic age. So you just briefly introduce the Vedic age, and after you have introduced the Vedic age, then you can also briefly introduce the later Vedic age as well. So we all knew that after the end of the Rigvedic age, later Vedic age started, right? From 10,000 BCE to existed up to 700 to 600 BCE. However, there is no agreement over, there is no anonymity over the existence of these different cultures, right? Because it is ancient Indian history and we need to have adequate evidences to prove the existence of these different cultures. And in fact, one very important characteristic which is very often associated with the later Vedic age is that the painted grey ware culture of the Iron Age is very often associated with the later Vedic age. This is very important. You just remember this. The painted grey ware culture of the Iron Age is associated with the later Vedic age. And then in the next part of the answer, you just have to discuss the changes that took place in the society in both Vedic age as well as the later Vedic age. Now when it comes to the society or social structure, social organization which existed in the Vedic age or Rigvedic age, there were clear social divisions, right? So how we have a social divisions like the caste system and different varnas. So in Vedic age there was a social division, so there were social divisions which existed, and people used to distinguish themselves from the non-Aryan native people, right? So it is believed that a people in the Rig Vedic age used to distinguish themselves from the non-Aryan people. And in fact, so Varna as a term which is having its roots in the Rig Vedic times, so was a term used by the Aryans to refer the color and even the category of the people. So Varna system or Varna as a term was very often used by Aryans in the early Vedic period, and there were different social classes which were existing across the Rig Vedic times, and in fact these social classes were organized or structured into different classes, such as there were warriors, priests, and even common people as well, right? So there were Sudras or untouchable category of people, and they were appeared in the beginning of the Rig Vedic age. There were no Sudras or there were no untouchables. However, the orthodox nature of the society has been started developing over a period of time, but at the end of the Rig Vedic age we could also see the Sudras and their mention in the society. And in fact, if you look at the Rig Vedic society, slavery was considered as was one of the most common form that was existing, and slaves were very often given as gifts to the priests, but there is also no reference to the wage labor in the Rig Vedic times. And in fact, in the Rig Vedic society, horse-drawn chariots, bronze objects were usually possessed by a very few number of people, and this has been suggesting that there were social distinctions that were existing, or divisions within different social classes existing in the Rig Vedic society. And even when we talk about the Rig Vedic society, so we could say that it was largely egalitarian in nature. When I say egalitarian in nature, so even though the social divisions were existing, they were not that much stark where we could see during the later Vedic period. Rather, in the Rig Vedic period, the society was largely egalitarian in nature. There were no distinct social divisions, and in fact these social divisions were started emerging in the later phases of the Rig Vedic times or Rig Vedic period. And in fact, if you look at the relations between different families or different groups of people, normally kinship was considered as the basis. This would be the foundation of the social structure in the Rig Vedic society. And in fact, people very often started identifying themselves with the clans, so different group of people having different clans, and in fact a more number of clans have come together and they used to form either tribe or jana. And so another very important aspect about the Rig Vedic society was the position of women. So what was the condition of women in the Rig Vedic society? So that is very important that we need to understand. A woman had a respectable position because in Rig Vedic times there were a lot of women poets and learned women, Apala, Lopamudra, Vishwavara. So there were all respected women in the Rig Vedic society. So therefore women enjoyed a respectable and honorable position in the society like men, and it was not possible to generalize about this. And in fact, even though women used to enjoy good position in the society, but society was generally or essentially patriarchal in nature, right? So I hope all of you knew about this patriarchal term. Patriarchal in the sense that the male member, the eldest male member in the family, would be the head of the family, and he would be the major decision making authority in the family. So therefore the society in the Vedic age was patriarchal in nature, and in fact people also very often used to prefer the male children and also cattle. So these were the preferences of the people in the Rig Vedic times. Now we'll look into the society in the later Vedic culture. So how was the society in the later Vedic culture? Now when we talk about these social divisions or the caste system, so the both social divisions and caste system have been becoming more and more prominent during the later Vedic periods, right? So social divisions of Varna became well established, firmly established in the society, and in fact teaching was considered as one of the occupation or profession of the Brahmins, right? So fighting or waging a wars would be the occupation of Kshatriyas. There were certain trading communities. Vaishyas would be considered as the trading communities, and even Shudras were considered as a class of people or the group of people who used to serve the above three or above or the top two castes. So that's how the social divisions were so distinct and so stark in the later Vedic age. And in fact Kshatriyas also challenged, they started challenging the Brahmanical hegemony, because Brahmins used to enjoy a lot of hegemony in the later Vedic society, but Kshatriyas very often tried to challenge the Brahmanical hegemony in the society, and even the exclusive privileges that the Brahmins used to enjoy in the later Vedic society. And in fact when we talk about such challenges that Brahmanism has faced, was Buddhism was an example, Jainism was also an example, right? So apart from that, a certain craft groups, craft making is very very famous. There were a number of artisans who engaged in making these different crafts. So there were number of craft groups and who managed to attain higher status. So for example the Ratakaras, so people who used to make chariots. Remember that in Vedic age and the later Vedic age, chariots played a very very important role, particularly the horse drawn chariots, right? So Ratakaras were known as chariot makers, and the right to wear the sacred thread. So they were allowed to wear the sacred thread, but others were not allowed to wear the sacred thread. And in the later Vedic age, another very important aspect about this age was what was the condition of women. Now if you look at the condition of women, so women's condition visibly or clearly declined or deteriorated in the later Vedic age. So earlier there were learned women poets, but during the later Vedic age, women were strictly confined to the four walls of the kitchen, and women were not allowed to take part in the political activities outside, and there were a lot of restrictions imposed on women, and child marriages were preferred, and condition of widows started deteriorating. So they used to have a miserable condition in the later Vedic period, right? So the woman's condition or position of women in the society started declining, and in fact the families or the society is becoming strictly patriarchal, and father was considered as the head of the family in the later Vedic age. And you can also compare both Vedic age and later Vedic age societies, like how I have given a table here, right? So you can write early Vedic economy and also the later Vedic economy. Now early Vedic economy is also known as the Rig Vedic economy or Rigvedic age. Now we'll make a proper comparison between the early Vedic economy and later Vedic economy as well. Now if you look at the early Vedic economy, now domestication of animals was primary occupation of people and agriculture was the secondary occupation. So this is how the economy of the Rigvedic age was actually structured, right? So domestication of animals were considered, cattle was considered as wealth of the people, and if you have more cattle, you would be the wealthy instead of land. So agriculture was the secondary occupation during the Rigvedic age. However, when we talk about the later Vedic economy, agriculture was considered as a primary occupation, and domestic animals or domestication of animals was considered as the secondary occupation. So now understand, there's a complete difference between the Rigvedic age as well as the later Vedic age. So both are not same, and in fact I've already told you that cattle was important source of wealth of the people, and even there were wars that used to took place for the cattle as well. So therefore you could imagine the importance of cattle for the Rigvedic people, and in the later Vedic people, cattle replaced land as the source of wealth of the people. And in fact, in the Rigvedic age, there were many people who were engaged in trade and commerce, and they used to do this activity across different parts of India or northern part of India. But on the other hand, in the later Vedic period, there were traders, and these traders have established guilds. When I say guilds, so these guilds were associations, right? So trader guilds or associations had formed, and in fact there were a number of coins, and even a better transportation system started improving or giving boost to trade and commerce during the later Vedic economy. But during the Rigvedic economy, there were no coins. Mostly trade was carried out through the barter system, and transportation was also not well developed. However, during the Rigvedic age, if you look at the major occupations of the people, so those occupations include weaving and carpentry work, pottery, crafts in gold and silver. So these were the major occupation. But on the other hand, the later Vedic economy, the occupations that we have discussed during the Rigvedic age, the other occupations include physicians, musicians. There were a wide variety of occupations that people used to follow during the later Vedic economy. Now ultimately you need to write that how in conclusion you have to write how society has changed from the Rigvedic age to the later Vedic age, and whatever changes that we have observed during the later Vedic age, they were continued even till now as well. Particularly the condition of women, and women were treated as a second grade citizens. Women still considered as a weaker sex, and they are vulnerable, etc. So you could write such a brief conclusion to end this answer, so that it would be comprehensive and holistic in nature. Next very important next very important question. This would be the second question. Remember, I've told you that there was General Studies paper 1 syllabus, art and culture, Indian art and culture. So therefore, don't you think that the second question is also from the art and culture portion of the Indian history, ancient Indian history? So question is, estimate the contribution of Pallavas of Kanchi for the development of art and literature of South India. So this is the question which is asked by UPSC in 2024 Mains General Studies paper 1. Remember, I've told you that the approach or the framework of any question is very important. You have to focus on that, because it ensures or it helps you make your answer more coherent, well structured, and that would also improves your presentation, and that will also helps you score very good marks. So therefore Pallavas contribution to the art and literature and even architecture is very very important. The show temples at Mamallapuram, so one of the best temple, Panch Pandava Rathas at Mahabalipuram, you may have heard about all these things, and they belong to the architecture or art of Pallavas of Kanchi. Now Kanchi is the headquarters of Pallavas, or Kanchi was the capital of Pallavas, and that's why so it is said that Pallavas of Kanchi. The question is, estimate the contribution of Pallavas of Kanchi for the development of art and literature of South India. Now what should be the approach of this question? Now when you look at this answer, you just have to frame, you just have to have a proper structure. The approach is that introduce Pallavas of Kanchi and then discuss contribution of Pallavas for the development of art. Remember, this is the first part of the question, and then you need to discuss the contribution of Pallavas for the development of for the development of the literature, right? Next part would be the literature, Pallavas, and then ultimately you need to conclude the answer by writing the overall significance of Pallavas. So a brief introduction about Pallavas. The Pallavas established their authority over the southern part of Andhra Pradesh and the northern Tamil Nadu, right? So do you know this Pulikat Lake, which is located in the southern part of Andhra Pradesh and northern part of Tamil Nadu, and that is the region where Pallavas seat was located, right? So their authority was concentrated in the region where the present day south of Andhra Pradesh and north of Tamil Nadu, with having a capital at Kanchi or Kanchipuram. So it is also known as Kanchipuram. And this Kanchi under the Pallavas became an important temple town, because a lot of famous temples were built at Kanchipuram, the capital of Pallavas. And even Kanchipuram was also a center of trade and commerce as well, and in fact a lot of trade was carried out between Kanchi in India to China at that point of time. And in fact Pallavas are also noted for their patronage to Hindu temple architecture, because they built a lot of temples, right? So rock cut temples, cave temples, and even structural temples as well. So there were evolution of different temple styles under the patronage of Pallavas, but their noted contribution was their patronage of Hindu temple architecture. It is notable, and it is a very important contribution of the Pallavas, right? So arts under the Pallavas of Kanchi. So what was the contribution and arts? So remember, the question was arts and literature and contribution of Pallavas to both arts and literature. Now when we talk about arts under the Pallavas of Kanchi, so without any doubt that Pallavas also patronized, they also immensely contributed for the development of a wide variety of art, particularly the fine arts. Okay, so there was an enormous contribution on the part of Pallavas for the development of these fine arts. And in fact there were two important music inscriptions, particularly the Kuduminamalai and Tirumayam music inscriptions, right? So these were two important music inscriptions under the Pallavas, shows their interest in music. So now, when we talk about arts, so arts include architecture, music, dance, drama, painting, sculpture, different things would comes under the arts. And these two music inscriptions have been showing their keen interest in music as an art form. And in fact they also used or invented a lot of musical instruments such as yaji, mrudangam and marasu. So there were these musical instruments were very popular and very famous during the Pallavas of Kanchi. And in fact, there were few notable kings of the Pallava kingdom, which included Mahendravarman I and also Narasimhavarman I. So both these kings were the music experts, and in fact the temple sculpture of Pallava period reveals that the art of dance was popular in those days, because the sculpture which was present in different temples, right, a show temple at Mamallapuram or Mahabalipuram, so they actually reveals that the sculpture was very famous. And even if you have seen the Pancha Pandava Rathas and pennants of Arjuna, so they were carved during the Pallavas, and they were very famous, and they indicate the sculpture was very famous at that point of time. And in fact, paintings was one of the important contribution of Pallavas, because paintings at a Chittanavasal, a place called Chittanavasal in present day Tamil Nadu, illustrate the nature of Pallava painting and how the painting would look, right? And in fact, one of the king of Pallavas, who is Mahendravarman, and he was popularly known as the Chitrakara Puli because of his expertise in painting, right? So that's how you could write simple points with examples, right? So you could mention such examples, such a specific content, you could score good marks. And then, so we'll have to discuss briefly art and architecture under the Pallavas as well. And in fact, Pallavas are very well known for patronizing the Dravidian style of temple architecture. Now if you look at the temple architecture in India, temple architecture is mainly three types. I hope all of you knew about these three different types of temple architecture. One is Nagara temple architecture, and second is Dravidian temple architecture. And Dravidian temple architecture is very famous in southern part of India, and Nagaran temple architecture is famous in the northern part of India with their distinct features, different characteristics. However, there were certain temples which have the characteristics of both Nagara style and Dravidian style, and those temples were known as the Vesara style temples or Vesara temple architecture. So these were the most famous popular temple architectural styles. But Pallavas have favored the Dravidian style of temple architecture, and in fact they started with the rock cut architecture. For example, imagine there is a huge monolithic rock, and those rocks would be carved, and then ultimately with the objective of converting those rocks into temples. And the rock cut architecture laid the foundation for the Dravidian style of temple architecture in southern part of India. And in fact, Pallavas were credited with the introduction of this style, Dravidian style. There was immense contribution on the part of Pallavas to this particular style of temple architecture. And if you look at the evolution of temple architecture under the Pallavas, and in fact they initially started with the rock cut temples, and then monolithic rathas, and finally it gave way to the structural temples, or the temples which consist of different structures instead of carving temples from the rock cut or rocks or the monolithic rathas. And in fact, the evolution of Pallavas architecture can also be further divided into four different stages. So Mahendra style, Mamalla style, Rajasimha style and Nandivarman style. And these different styles were followed and popularized, patronized by different kings of Pallavas of Kanchi. And in fact, the influence of the Pallavas of Kanchi can be seen temples throughout the Southeast Asian architecture. And as I have already told you, this was the shore temple of Mahabalipuram or Mamallapuram under the Pallavas, and even the Kailasnath temple of Kanchipuram along the Vedavati river. So don't confuse with the Kailas temple. A Kailas temple would be different, that was built by the Rashtrakutas, but this was another Kailasnath temple at Kanchipuram. And contribution of Pallavas to the literature, right? So what was their specific contribution to literature? And when we talk about the contribution of Pallavas to the literature, so during the period of Pallavas, so both religious literature as well as the secular literature were very famous. They patronized both religious and secular literature, but among those two, religious literature was widely patronized and popularized. And in fact, two languages which were very famous during the Pallavas of Kanchi, so they were Sanskrit and Tamil literature. So they flourished during this time. So Sanskrit and Tamil were patronized and popularized by the Pallavas of Kanchi. And in fact, so when we talk about the Sanskrit language, it has got the patronage, the royal patronage of the Pallavas of Kanchi. And Mahendravarman I was the author of Matavilasa Prahasanam, and it was a satirical play in Sanskrit, and even the Bhagavata Juka. Okay, so these were written by Mahendravarman I. And in fact, Dandin, who was a very well known Sanskrit a grammatician, I would say, so he adorned the court of Pallava king Narasimhavarman II. And in fact, Dandin was written the Dashakumara Charita and even Avanti Sundari Katha in Sanskrit languages. And Kanchipuram was the capital of the Pallavas, and the Kanchipuram was very often known as a very important center of Sanskrit learning. And Nalariya Divya Prabandham, it was a significant work of Vaishnava saints. It consisted of 4,000 Tamil verses written by 12 alvars. Okay, so Naladivya Prabandham. Now, if you look at a Tamil socio-religious reform movement, there was also Shaiva Nayanmars and Vaishnava Alvars. So they used to write different things. And Nalariya Divya Prabandham was written by the Vaishnavite saints or Vaishnavite Alvars during the Pallavas of Kanchi. And the next very important question, which is from the modern Indian history. Remember, I've told you that modern Indian history is also part of the UPSC syllabus, and even important figures from the Indian freedom struggle was also very important topic in mains examination. The question was, what were the events that led to Quit India movement, and point out its results. So this was the question. So this is also a very simple question, a straightforward question, because there were no directive words attached to it. Comment, discuss, critically analyze, nothing. So very simple question. What were the events that led to the Quit India movement, and point out the results of those events or the results of the Quit India movement. That's how you have to simply address. And if you have gone through this, and if you have revised this, you could address it perfectly, and you could also score very good marks. And first and foremost, we'll try to have an approach for this question. The approach is that first and foremost, you have to introduce the Quit India movement, and then you have to discuss the events that led to Quit India movement, and then discuss results of Quit India movement briefly, and conclude the answer by writing the overall significance of the Quit India movement, right? So this is how you have to structure this particular answer. Now, in the introduction, what you need to write. So a Quit India movement, so we all knew when it was launched. It was launched August 8, 1944, and this movement was also known as the August Kranti movement, or the Quit India movement that was launched in August 8, 1942 was a crucial turning point in India's struggle for independence, right? So it played a very, very important role in getting India's independence in the year 1947, and it was the last major struggle for freedom on the part of Indians or Indian leaders. And in fact, it was a leaderless movement, and several factors have contributed to its initiation. So we'll understand what are those factors which have contributed for the launching this Quit India movement. And in fact, we all knew that 1939 was the year when Second World War was started. And in fact, Britain was the elite power, and there were Axis powers like Japan, Germany, and Italy. So there were Axis powers, and the developments of World War II, including Japan's rapid advances in the Southeast Asia, and even British rulers' exploitation of Indian resources, have created a sense of urgency, particularly in the backdrop of Second World War II, among the Indian nationals, and who saw this as an opportunity. The Second World War and the conditions in India, and the struggles that the British government has been facing within India and outside India, has provided an opportunity for the Indian leaders or the Indians to start a mass movement against the British government. And in fact, in this movement, Mahatma Gandhi gave a call of do or die, right? So this would be the last a great movement or last great mass movement in India, and that ultimately paved a way for India's independence. Now we'll try to understand what are the major events that were led to the movement or declaring the Quit India movement. And in fact, so we all knew that the Second World War was started, and Second World War, the British government involved the British India without consulting the elected government or the national leadership, and that has led to the growing discontent among the Indian leadership that how can the British government did involve British India or Indian people and Indian resources without consulting the Indian people, Indian the elected government of Indians, etc. So although they gained the support of the World War II, because there were certain perspectives of Jawaharlal Nehru, Subhash Chandra Bose, and even Mahatma Gandhi also, right? So they did not want to, the British government did not want to transfer power easily. But Indian leaders have supported the British government in Second World War, or Indian people have supported the British government in World War II, with the hope that after the end of the World War II, the British government would give complete independence but not dominion status. And in fact, the British government had come up with August Offer and Cripps Mission, but they were failed to satisfy the demands of nationalists, because these August Offer and Cripps Mission have not been providing any significant concessions, and the British government also not ready to give complete independence to the India. And because of those reasons, August Offer and Cripps Mission were also failed to satisfy the demands of the nationalists. Furthermore, the British support to the demand of Pakistan by the Muslim League, because at that point of time, Muslim League also strongly advocating that they should be given a separate nation of Pakistan. And in fact, the British has been supporting or had been supporting the demand of Pakistan by the Muslim League, was making Indian nationalists, particularly Gandhi, infuriated that the Indian leadership don't want that the Pakistani nation or the Pakistan should not be separated from India. So that was the stand of majority of the leaders during the last phases of the Indian national movement. And in fact, India's participation in the Second World War also resulted in economic burdens and even restrictions in the country. When we talk about the economic burdens that the people have faced during the Second World War, so these economic burdens including rising prices, shortage of essential goods, and even increased taxation to finance the war efforts, and even the shortage of essential goods, because most of the essential goods and even food grains were diverted to Britain's against war efforts, and that has caused immense hardships, immense struggle for people of India. And that's where the Indian leadership sensed an opportunity to start a fight against the British government. And in fact, the British also suffered, the British military also suffered a certain setbacks in Southeast Asia against Japan, and Japan has also been making a rapid advances towards India, and they are almost entered the northeastern part of India, and that has created a cause of concern and a sense of urgency among the Indian leadership. And in fact, Indian leadership Indian leadership ready to support or ready to be part of the Second World War at a full scale, because they had the fear that Japan would occupy India. Japan was also a colonial power. Japan was also looking for the new colonies. It was also imperialistic in nature, right? So therefore Japan almost has reached the northeastern part of India, and in fact there were in certain areas there was a retreat of British troops from Burma, further increased this fear among the Indian leadership. So because of all these factors, what generally happened was the Indian National Congress Working Committee met, and Indian National Congress has convened the All India Congress Committee meeting at a place called Gavalia Tank, Bombay, 8 August 1942, and then they passed a famous Quit India resolution. And in this Quit India resolution, Mahatma Gandhi gave a call of do or die on the very same day. And in fact, the resolution that was passed by the All India Congress Committee demanded an end to British rule in India with immediate effect, and formation of provisional government after the war, and even declaration of free India. So these were the objectives of the resolution that was passed by the All India Congress Committee. So this is how you have to address the first part of the answer, and in the second part of the answer you have to write the results of the Quit India movement. Now what were the results of the Quit India movement? Now in fact, there was a mass uprising, and people from different sections and different social strata have participated in this movement on a large scale. Student, lawyers, and even the laborers, women, so even Muslims, and a different and wide variety of section of people have actively taken part in this movement. So we could say that it was a violent, we could say that it was a violent movement, but still there were a lot of debates about this, whether it is a violent or peaceful or a violent movement. So despite a brutal repression or the suppression from the British government, so the leaders arrested and communication was cut off. There were widespread protests, strikes, and even sabotage erupted across the country, and that indicates there was a mass uprising against the British government, demanding the self-rule or complete independence from the British government. And in fact, the movement was suppressed by the British government, and that has been leading to the arrests, violence, and martial law was imposed in many areas, and that has further intensified the demand for independence of the people. And even there were certain post-war negotiations, even though unsuccessful in short term, Quit India movement laid the groundwork for post-war negotiations, and that ultimately led to independence in 1947. So Quit India movement was active until 1944, when British government suppressed it ruthlessly. Although the Quit India movement failed to oust the British from India immediately, because it was an objective, and the resolution which was passed by All India Congress Committee also have this objective, but this Quit India movement was a significant and a very important for India's quest for self-rule or complete independence, because it was the last mass movement which had a significant impact on the British government, that British government has also got the sense that it is not possible to rule India without the cooperation of Indians, or we can no longer have our presence in India. So the fourth question which was asked by UPSC in General Studies paper 1 is about the sea surface temperature rise because of the global warming and climate change. Remember, this question is from a geography section, and within geography, climate change is one of the very important area or climate phenomenon, because climate change is an important phenomenon which is part of geography, because of a physical geography is also part of the syllabus, right? So question is, what is sea surface temperature rise? So very simple. So there were no directive words attached to this, a very simple question. And second part, how does the sea surface temperature rise affect the formation of the tropical cyclones? Because we have the huge coast, and the eastern and western coast of India is becoming more and more vulnerable to these tropical cyclones. The intensity and frequency of these cyclones has also been increasing. So you could also go through, you can pause the video and you could also go through these different areas where cyclones are being called with different names, and what should be the approach of this question, right? So this has a specific approach. The approach is that first and foremost, you have to introduce what is the sea surface temperature, and so then you have to discuss the sea surface temperature rise with some data from any report, and then discuss sea surface temperatures rise impact on the formation of tropical cyclones, and ultimately you need to conclude the answer by writing ways to prevent the sea surface temperature rise. And in the introduction, you just write, in February 2024, the global sea surface temperature, or it is also called as SST, has reached a historic high of 21.06 degrees Celsius. And in fact, this particular temperature data was reported by the Copernicus Climate Change Service on March 5th, 2024. And in fact, it is one of the highest levels of sea surface temperatures, and it has been indicating that these sea surface temperatures have been increasing at a rapid pace, and that could pose a potential danger of melting glaciers and rising levels of the sea surface, and submerging or flooding the coastal areas. And even increasing sea surface temperatures would also give the fillip, or will also result in the increasing intensity of cyclones. So therefore, this marks the highest recorded sea surface temperatures since data collection began in the year 1971, and it has been surpassing the previous record of 20.98 degrees Celsius that was set in August 2023. And then you have to write why oceans are getting warmer. You could briefly write about this. What were the reasons? Because of those reasons, oceans were getting warmer and warmer. A substantial portion of excess heat is generated by the greenhouse gases. It has been absorbed by the oceans, and that has been causing them to gradually warm over a period of time. And in fact, additionally, there were factors such as El Nino and La Nina. So these were weather phenomenons, and the movement of winds and shifting shifting weather patterns. So they were categorized by abnormal warming of surface waters in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. So they also contributed to the rising ocean temperatures and even global surface temperatures as well. This is the second reason for rising sea surface temperatures. And apart from that, there were certain greenhouse gases, and if we burn fossil fuels, industrial emissions, vehicular emissions, which uses fossil fuels, these greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, ozone, and even nitrogen oxide, they can actually trap heat, they can hold heat in the atmosphere, and that would further increases the global temperatures, or it would even lead to the global warming. So furthermore, Changes in the atmospheric dynamics, such as weaker than average winds, they would lead to reduced dust blowing off the Sahara desert, and they have also influenced the ocean temperatures as well. Now the next part of the question is how a sea surface temperature rise affects the formation of cyclones. Now, warmer sea surface temperatures would lead to the increasing evaporation of seawater. Seawater evaporation would increase, and when seawater has been evaporating at a faster pace, and that would inject a more moisture into the atmosphere. There would be more and more moisture in the atmosphere, and this moisture is critical and very important for cyclone formation, or this mechanism is very important for the cyclone formation. And in fact, moisture from increased evaporation further rises or increases, and it cools down and it condenses, and then it would result in rainfall, or then releasing the latent heat which is trapped by this water. And this release of latent heat further fuels the cyclone and making it stronger and stronger, more intense over a period of time. And warming of the ocean further causes the air above it to rise and creating the low pressure system over the oceans, and tropical cyclones form around this low pressure area as air moves in to replace the rising warm air. With increasing sea surface temperatures, cyclones may form in regions that were previously too cool to support them, and this means areas further from the or farther from the equator even may experience more frequent tropical cyclones as well. Tropical cyclones, particularly hurricanes and typhoons, they derive their energy from the warm ocean waters, but increasing sea surface temperatures would further increase the intensity and the frequency of these tropical cyclones, and higher sea surface temperatures provide more heat and also moisture, because that would intensify these storms. And ultimately you have to understand how these tropical cyclones are being formed, and when you write a conclusion, sea surface temperature rise is concerning trend that is driven by human activities. So it is mostly driven by the human activities such as greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, and several other anthropogenic activities. So therefore it is very important to take action immediately as early as possible to reduce these impacts and also mitigate the effects of climate change on marine ecosystems and also the weather patterns. So that's how you can write a brief conclusion in this answer. And that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. And tomorrow also we'll have a few more questions. We'll try to discuss them in a very detailed manner. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.